Woman, woman, you said you wanted me to review, so I married an ex-murderer on 4K. Woman. Hey, what is up everybody? Welcome back to the Mid-Level Media channel, your hub for everything physical media and entertainment. I am Ken, and today guys, we are here to review So I Married an Axe Murderer on 4K. This is the latest 4K release from Sony, and I was really excited about this one when it got first announced because it's just one of those like obscure dark romantic comedies from the 90s that you didn't think would ever get this kind of treatment or upgrade. So I'm just super excited to talk about this one here today. But before we get into it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We talk about physical media, in case you haven't figured it out yet, every single day on this channel. Blu-rays, 4Ks, owning the movies that you love, all that stuff there behind me. Also, be sure to leave me a comment down below. Are you planning on picking up this 4K release? This is the only version that there is out there. There's no like exclusive steelbook or anything else like that. And this is currently going for $26.98 right now. I will leave the Amazon link down below in the description if you want to purchase it. And just let me know your general thoughts on this movie as well. Did you watch it when it first came out? Did you grow up with this movie? Let me know in that comment section below, and then turn on bell notifications for all future videos. So diving into the movie first, I do like to talk about the actual film itself before we get into all the technical specs and stuff later on in the video. This was directed by Thomas Shalom, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he was mostly a TV director. I was looking up some of his credits on IMDb. It seemed like he did a lot of TV. I think he was a producer on the show West Wing as well. So not really like a notable filmmaker. It seems like this was his most notable film that he did in his career. This came out in 1993, so it came out around that time when Mike Myers was really popping. He was at the height of his popularity on SNL. He had done one Wayne's World film, and actually Wayne's World 2 came out the very same year that this one did. And it stars, of course, Mike Myers and also Nancy Travis, who I've seen in several, I feel like, sitcoms. I feel like she was on one with Tim Allen in maybe the 2000s. I can't remember the name of that off the top of my head, but she's been in tons of stuff throughout the years for sure. And this movie is basically about a poet in San Francisco that gets a girlfriend and then marries her and then suspects that she may have been killing off her husbands in the past and thinks that he might be next. So it's definitely a fun little premise to kind of base your movie on. You can go a lot of different directions. Now, does this deliver still as an actual movie? For me, I had a ton of fun rewatching this movie. I hadn't seen it probably since the early 2000s. I feel like the last time I watched this movie was on cable. Now, as a kid, I watched it all the time on VHS. I remember it being on HBO back in the day. I'm pretty sure this is on Max right now, currently streaming, if you want to check it out on there before you commit to buying this physical media release. But I still think this movie's a ton of fun. It's a rush of 90s nostalgia. It feels very 90s, like in a lot of aspects of this movie. So it is very much of its time. So if you're not all in on that like 90s nostalgia, like the soundtrack, the look, the feel of that era, I don't feel like you're gonna get too much enjoyment out of this film. But like if you grew up in that decade, like you're really gonna enjoy this movie. There's just a particular style to 90s stuff and movies and just pop culture that I personally gravitate towards because I grew up then. It has a great soundtrack. It has that song that I feel like played in like every single 90s romantic comedy, that There She Goes song by The Laws. It's very catchy. I still love it. I still think it hits. And like I said, this is definitely a dark romantic comedy at its core. It's not what I would call a pure comedy like, you know, Mike Myers would be more known for with Austin Powers and Wayne's World. It's more of a romantic comedy with some dark tinges to it. It has a fun premise, and it doesn't really overstay its welcome either. It's only 93 minutes, so you get in, you have some fun, and you get out. And I actually think that Nancy Travis and Mike Myers have incredible chemistry together throughout this film. Like they're just very enjoyable to watch as a couple in this movie. There's a lot of fun cameos as well, including Phil Hartman, who I absolutely love. Like I love everything that Phil Hartman does. It's tragic that he was taken from us so soon, because like every movie he was in, in the 90s. Like, I just love him. He makes me laugh without even trying, it feels like. And he shows up as like the tour guide at Alcatraz when they go there. And I just had a smile on my face the entire time he was on screen. I wouldn't put this up there with a Wayne's World with an Austin Powers. It's not a comedy like that. It is very much a romantic comedy, like I said, with a little bit of horror vibe to it, but it's not overtly funny and comedic like those Austin Power movies and the Wayne's World movies are. So I don't think it's really right to compare this to those. But some of the comedy, in particular with his parents, you can definitely see where it inspired Austin Powers years later, because he does play his father in this movie. So he's playing dueling roles like he would later on with Fat Bastard and Dr. Evil. So you can kind of see the origins of where that type of comedy from Mike Myers would come from. I also don't think that the story quite lives up to its potential. There's a lot of really cool things they could have done with this movie, but they don't really go there as much as I think that they should have. And ultimately, by the time that you get to the end of this movie, the conclusion just feels like it comes out of nowhere, and it's ultimately just very unsatisfying. Overall, though, I still think this is a very good time. You know, it doesn't live up to the other Mike Myers films, the juggernauts like Austin Powers and Wayne's World, but it's still an incredibly fun, cute, romantic comedy from the 90s, and it just gives you that rush of nostalgia. If you like that time period, I feel like you'll like this movie. So I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's still held up pretty well. So let's go ahead and jump into the transfer. I know everybody's dying to know how this looks on 4K. So the last time this got a Blu-ray release was in 2008. So it's been 15 years since this thing has gotten a release, an upgrade of some kind, which is way too long. But from what I've read, the Blu-ray from back in 2008, and it makes sense, it was an early Blu-ray, did not look great. Like, it did not get good reviews on Blu-ray.com. A lot of people were crapping on it. I don't personally have it in my collection. I've never owned this movie. I don't think I've ever owned it on DVD or Blu-ray. We had a VHS back in the day, but I still don't have that. So from what I read, that Blu-ray was complete crap. It kind of felt the same as, you know, the Reservoir Dogs Blu-ray, where, you know, that was a very early Blu-ray that came out, and it was almost like they hadn't yet fully figured out how to do those HD transfers yet, and it kind of just looked like an upscale DVD. So that's kind of what I was reading about the Blu-ray. So this was in desperate need of some kind of upgrade. So I'm very happy that Sony came in and did this transfer. This is a native 4K restoration with Dolby Vision and HDR10, and it looked fantastic. It's definitely in line with the quality that you would expect from Sony. I know everybody talks up Sony transfers because they just feel like one of the only studios that really takes that time and care, and their transfers really feel like almost boutique level transfers. Like, they feel like they do the same quality work that a Vinegar Syndrome would do, that an Arrow Video, that a Scream Factory, Shout Factory. They just feel like, they don't feel like they just crap out the transfers. It feels like they take their time and actually focus on restoring the film that they're doing. So I think that's why a lot of people appreciate Sony for the work that they do. And across the board, the picture quality here is crystal clear. This movie is set in San Francisco, so you get a lot of great like scenery and scenic shots of the Golden Gate Bridge, and of course they're on Alcatraz at one point. So then you got the trolleys, the red trolleys kind of going through the city, and all that stuff just looked amazing. It looked like a film that could have been shot yesterday. It just had crystal clear picture quality. The grain structure was very well done. It wasn't distracting at all, but it still had that filmic look to it. You still felt like you were watching a film that came out in the 90s. It had that feel to it, but it still felt very cleaned up as well. It was just incredible, the work that they did with this transfer here. The HDR really shined in some of those nightclub scenes with the neon lights and stuff. All those colors just looked wonderful, especially reflecting off of the skin itself. Like Mike Myers actually up on stage doing like his spoken word poetry bit. He looked great, like great facial detail. His clothing just looked super detailed, like you can make out every single like stitch and fiber in his jacket that he was wearing. It just looked incredible. So yeah, overall, I really thought this was a great transfer. Sony just knocked this one out of the park, as they always do. Like, I really was not expecting to be disappointed with this release, and I was not. So getting into the audio, you also have an upgrade here with the 7.1 Dolby Atmos track, and I thought that that sounded fantastic. This was not a movie that necessarily needed that Atmos upgrade, but it's always appreciated for sure. Like I said, the soundtrack is spectacular. And there were some moments that I felt like it got a chance to shine, in particular the last 20 minutes, which I'm not going to spoil here, that really kind of lent itself well to that Atmos. Like I was kind of hearing the booms and the clicks and stuff, and some of the things that were going on, the shuffling that was going on in those last 20 minutes, very well, you know, through my sound system. So I thought the audio sounded great. Again, this isn't a movie that I feel like needed that 7.1 Atmos, but the Atmos is always appreciated, especially for the sound junkies out there. I'm also a big fan of this slipcover. Now, somebody did point out that the old school So I Married an Axe Murderer poster had her holding an axe, and I feel like I remember that from the VHS cover. So I have no idea why they removed that here. I don't know if there was like some kind of political reason why they wanted to make it look less threatening. I don't know why, because that's the premise of the film, and it's such an important part of that poster. So I have no, because Mike Myers is holding flowers behind his back, and she's supposed to be holding an axe. Like that's the whole thing with this poster that makes it what it is. So I don't know why they took that out of it. So that's a little bit disappointing, but I do really like this image. You know, them standing in front of that heart-shaped moon, and I love the font work right there as well. I like the 30th anniversary banner that they put up top and the 4K Ultra. I think that's a really nice banner. And on the back, I'll go ahead and show that off as well. You got the synopsis, you got the special features, which we'll talk about here in a second. Some of the specs there at the bottom. And then opening this up, you do get a digital code here, but unfortunately, you only get that 4K disc. You do not get a Blu-ray disc here. Now, I did point out that the Blu-ray looked like crap, but it would have been nice for them to have done a new Blu-ray scan, a new 4K scan on a new Blu-ray, and include that in this set as well. But yeah, the digital code, you get the 4K with some nice disc art on it. So overall, I like the packaging. I think Sony usually does a good job with their packaging and slipcovers. And getting into the special features, there are 30 minutes of new deleted scenes here, which I watched a few of them. I didn't watch all of them. Definitely some fun stuff that they added in here that Sony kind of dug up from the past. So definitely cool of them that they did that, because there were no new features added to that Blu-ray back in 2008. That was the 15th anniversary edition, and they did nothing back then in terms of special features. So there was nothing to port over here on this 4K release. Now, there are theatrical trailers here, but again, that's kind of included in every single release. No audio commentary or anything like that. Now, while I will praise Sony for at least adding something here, they're a studio, and studios aren't necessarily known for doing that with some of their catalog 4K releases. So I got to give them some credit there. It still would have been nice to have some new features, interviews, maybe a new commentary. I don't know if you could have got Mike Myers back, but this has to be an important movie in his career. Like, this is one that I don't feel like is talked about a lot. So I feel like he would have wanted to come back and maybe do an audio commentary for this, maybe with the director and Nancy Allen. Like, that could have been really awesome if they would have done something like that and some new interviews. So again, I don't know how possible that is. I don't know how willing the actors are to come back and talk about these movies, but it definitely would have been cool if they were able to add that kind of stuff. So while I'll give them credit for the 30 minutes of deleted scenes, they could have still done more for the 30th anniversary edition. And the price here, guys, is $26.98. It's not a terrible price, you know, especially since you get some new features, and the quality here of the 4K and the upgrade in sound, I think definitely adds to the value of this release, but that's still a very steep price point to pay. And like I said, without that Blu-ray release, I feel like they should have lowered that price down a little bit, but it's still cool that we got a movie like this on 4K. And I think that if you are a fan of this movie, I think this is something that you should support, so we get more of this type of stuff, more of these 90s comedies on 4K. I think that would be super awesome. So I do recommend getting this. At the end of the day, you do get those new features, and I think the quality here is just astounding across the board. I think Sony did a fantastic job on this 4K. It would have been nice to have a Blu-ray and a little bit new special features, and I don't know why they removed the axe, but overall, I do recommend this release from Sony. I have it linked down below if you want to purchase it on 4K. So thank y'all so much for watching this 4K review of So I Married an Axe Murderer. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave me a comment down below, turn on those bell notifications, and follow me on all my social media accounts. Those links are down below in the description, and we'll see you next time.